Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. And today I have the privilege of introducing Kandace and a book that has just recently been released that Kandace has written and developed. And it's a workbook style book, and it is called Grief Untangled, a guide to help you through the sorrow of grief and loss. And we've been talking, Kandace, about grief and sorrow and loss for the whole time that we have known each other. And I have known so many of your stories of grief and loss that you have experienced. And even before I met you, you were on this journey of grief untangled and doing a lot of work in this area of helping people who have experienced a lot of grief. And so today, it's just such a joy to be able to talk with you about this workbook that you have developed. And so, tell us a little bit about what the workbook is and who it is for, and just anything that you would like to share about it.
Yeah, thank you, Cher, for just wanting to do this. And your kindness and curiosity throughout this whole journey has been such a blessing to me. I think sometimes as creatives, and I know you're creative too, with your painting and your writing, and I don't want to say it can feel lonely, but sometimes it can a little bit. And so to just have a few people that are genuinely interested, and you have made me feel that way, and I really appreciate yeah, you being with me in that. But I don't even really know where to start, except um as you said, I had a childhood with multiple losses, and a lot of grief in many different ways. And even though the workbook or guidebook is specifically more geared toward when we lose a loved one to death, um, it's still going to help people in any type of loss. But when I was little, I went through, I think I told you my first loss was the loss of my dog, who I was very close to. And story after story of grief and loss in my life, it had to be shut down. There was no room to talk about it. And if we did, it was more about, you know, what we had that we could be thankful for. Just hard emotions and sorrow wasn't a part of my childhood to be able to process. I carried that with me throughout decades of not being able to sit with myself in deep pain, that there were very valid reasons to have deep pain. So I learned an arsenal of coping behaviors to not have to do that. And that was, quote, working until my dad died in 2018. That wiped me out. And I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah. Mm.
I knew that if I did not go through the grief process, and in the way that the grief can be seen, and the way that the grief can be held and processed, um, I don't know what, I don't know what that would have led to, but I was in a pretty dark place. And so the gift that came through, um, me saying, okay, I need help now. I mean, that's what it came down to. Like, I need help. And that led me to going, and like the very thing that I couldn't do most of my life, my dad dies. So within months after my dad died, I'm already like, I'm going to help other people in this, right? So I start this organization called Grief Untangled, and I go and I get this, training for traumatic grief and loss. But one day I'm watching a movie, And it's a movie about a man who lost his wife, and within a year of her death, he started his own little grief organization, wrote a book, was traveling the country. I don't even know the name of this movie. I promise it's a real movie, but it was so divine because a woman comes along and says, "You're you're out trying to help other people, and you haven't even allowed yourself to go through your own grief process." And share, all I can say is I knew in that moment, it was like God said, "You're that man."
Wow.
And that's also at the same time I started story work.
Which is so normal. I'm going to use that word, like so healthy. I'll use the word healthy. It's so healthy, right? Because you were experiencing the loss of a person who was so dear and so important to you, which then opened the door for you to be able to go back and begin to access all of the grief and loss that had been just packed down and shut down for all the years of your childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and sitting in that training, these were a lot of these people in this training with me. So it wasn't just for therapists, but a lot of them were therapists that were adding this certification. There were some other coaches there. Um, and, many of them had lost children. And then there was a panel of parents that came years later and talked about. And I just remember, like, I I don't really know what I'm doing right now, but I know I'm called to be with people in these places. It's interesting because before I left for that training, so my dad, w- on his deathbed, he was holding a wooden cross. They're called holding crosses. And he died with it in his hand. He had his hands wrapped around it. And he died with that, and then I have it now. But when I was walking out the door to go to that training, I was literally at the door and I heard within myself, take that cross.
Mm.
And as I'm sitting in the training, I have that cross in a bag. I hadn't brought it out. But when parents started sharing their story
Mm.
of the loss of children,
Mm.
I reached down and I held on to that cross while I listened.
Mm. Wow.
And wow, I haven't talked about that. So part of this still feels a little bit of a mystery to me. I don't think it's something I would have chosen to do. But it is something that's very fulfilling for me to be able to offer my full presence and tears for people who are grieving. I don't have to try. Like, it's not something I even have to, I don't know. It's just natural.
Yeah, your heart is full of compassion for those who are grieving. I mean, it is. Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's such a gift for those of us who are around you. Yeah,
Well, you get to see some of my anger too,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But even my anger, right? I do believe is connected to compassion.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Passion, compassion. Um, tell us a little bit about your guidebook and why did you put into it what you put into it? How can this guidebook actually be a resource that can help people journey through the grief process?
Mhm. So the guidebook has three components to it, and these three components are the components that we went over in the training. But I wanted to, not that it wasn't perfect. It's just I wanted to kind of break it down and simplify it with so that training was 4 days and there was just a lot. I wanted to break it down into something very simple. Um, Anybody could use this no matter where they're at on the grief journey, but I do see it being most helpful for people who are in the early days of grieving because it's going to give bite size, um, there's not a lot of words in this journal.
Oh.
Okay. But there are some thoughts, there's some quotes, there's some questions. I have a chart that gives maybe like 12 to 13, 14 things of just simple things that you can do that is ways that you can be with your grief.
Mhm.
Okay. And so um, the other component to the grief book is so when we are in that dark space, a lot of times people get very disconnected to the idea of hope.
Mm.
Okay. Like, especially when you lose a child, like the only thing that you want is your child back. That's all. And yet you have to war. Your mind and your heart will battle like I will never get this in this lifetime, right? And so I really wanted people to know this is so normal. Like you're valid, your feelings, your thoughts, like don't let anybody take that away from you.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. In other words, take the time and the space to really be with yourself and what you're feeling in this moment.
Mhm. Yeah, with acceptance. And so here's what I want to say. We meet people with where they're at. For some people, they do have a strong faith. Now, strong faith doesn't mean you don't have excruciating emotional pain,
Yeah.
but people are at different places in that. I'll never forget one thing what the trainer said, at the beginning of traumatic grief and loss, some people come in and they end up sometimes walking away from the certainty that they thought that their faith gave them.
Yeah.
And then some people actually find comfort in drawing near to something that gives them more hope for the future. But what I want to say is, you, as the guide, as the person who's providing full presence, it's not it's not our place to get anybody anywhere.
Mm.
It's just be
Mm.
with them on their journey as they authentically allow their process to go in the way that it's going to go.
Wow. That just feels profound. Can you say that again? It's not that we're trying to get anyone to go somewhere. It's not that we have this formula or this step one, two, three. What? Say again what you just said there because that just feels so important to me.
Yeah, it's just showing up with being fully present, and that the idea of being fully present, you have to be cognizant and aware. What does it mean to be fully present? Now, part of that training is noticing when you're starting to leave that person or you're starting to go into yourself. It's normal that we would do that, you know. But how do we get back to being fully present? And so as we're fully present with that person, what happens? And I'll tell you, the healing of childhood trauma makes this so much easier.
Mhm.
You don't feel this drivenness or this need to try to fix something or get someone to see it how you see it, believe it how you believe it, do it the way you do it. No, you just witness and you pour out your love and compassion on them no matter where they're at.
Mhm.
And that can be really hard if you are still enmeshed. And if somebody else isn't okay, then you're not okay. Because I will tell you, people in this depth of grief, they're not going to show up being okay or feeling like they're okay.
Yeah. And is that part of what the guidebook helps them do is to be in that place of not feeling okay and like almost in a sense like giving permission like it's okay that you're not okay.
Mhm. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and that they can go slow. They can choose not to do a certain exercise. it's just kind invitations as people are ready. One of the things that I want to mention before we close out is um, people that show up in grief counseling, going through a grief book. It's usually an indication that there is a level of willingness that they have, whether they feel ready or not, that there is a willingness to see, like, could this be something
Yeah.
that can guide me on my grief journey?
Yeah.
If somebody is absolutely not willing or ready, they won't show up.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And I liked as we just shared, as we were preparing to record today, but how so many of the elements that you put into the guidebook are just little things that are compassionate, like the size of the font and the like not having a lot of words, but smaller excerpts and beautiful images, and so much that just I think is, I don't want to say bite size, but smaller size sections, if you will, that a person who is in this kind of a place can actually hold. It's
Mm.
not overwhelming. It's not
Yeah.
whole book with 250 words that have to be read. It's a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and that just feels so kind to me, Candace.
Mm. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Actually, I think the whole thing is only 50, I think it's like 55 or 6 pages.
Yeah,
Okay. And yeah, some of it is just a page with an image and a quote for someone to look at. Um, yeah, I feel that I think if somebody goes through it, like my whether they have someone else be with them in or not, I think they're going to find that it'll be helpful. But my prayer is that whether it's a trusted friend that knows how to offer full presence and be with grief, or a coach or a counselor, that feels like it would be the kindest thing they could do for themselves.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing this introduction to your guidebook with us today, Candace. And is there anything else about it that you would like to say before we close our session today?
I don't think so. I'm just I will share that this morning. I already shared this with you. I just released it, into God's hands. And I think I had a part that was showing up that, what if I've made mistakes? What if I didn't say something right? And I just thought today, like, no, I know I'm human. I know my heart. I know, um, I know that I have people who will hold me through this, and I just released it.
Yeah. And it's a labor of love that is birthed after years of doing so much of your own work, Candace, and such a gift to the world, because every one of us does experience grief and loss at deep levels at different times in our lives. And so thanks for just developing a resource that can be placed into the hands of so many people who really are in desperate need of it.
Thank you, Cher. Love
Yeah.
you so much.
I love you too, friend.